Hello, good morning, welcome. I'm Beatriz Bueno. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here to start this move that we call is a reality, and we're here to start this movement, this wonderful movement that begins today, November the 29th, 2021. I'd like to remind you all that we have simultaneous translation. We're doing that in the Zoom platform, and we're also on YouTube. So those of you who have any difficulty, we have our links below so that you can watch us on YouTube. So how can you access the interpretation? You can click there, okay? Click on the globe below and you will find it, okay? All right, so first of all, I'd like to thank you. Thank you all who registered in the Move Integral Brasil and the sponsors, the supporters, and the partners of this event that made it a reality so that today we could be here. So I'd like to invite now for us to begin looking at our schedule for today. We have a lot of novelties and good things. So we will have very soon our meditation with Vanessa Franco, and then we will have an opening session with Marcelo Cardoso and Ari Raynsford and our special guest, Ken Wilber. It's a very special panel that we will have also with Jeff Salzman, Bence, Ganti, and Marcelo Cardoso. And then we have our closing session with Marcelo Cardoso. So I will begin by calling Vanessa Franco. Vanessa, are you there? So that we can begin our meditation for today. Welcome, Vanessa. Good evening, Bia. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone in the integral community here in Brazil and everyone else. It's very special to be here. I'd like to thank the Institute for the invitation and to take up the responsibility, which is so great, right? To be here helping you begin this moment to do our mental stretching. And I'm sure that everybody is already doing that, but especially in our hearts. I think my greatest role here is to align our hearts together and to go into a connection of energy of this purpose that moves all of our meeting. We prepared a video to intermediate this meditation, and this video has subtitles in English. So for those of you who do not speak Portuguese, you can look. It's a video that's going to be able to intermediate things, and then the voice and the music will conduct all of us. To those of you who do not need the subtitles, you can just allow yourselves to relax, close your eyes, and leave the sound and let the sound conduct you. So you can regulate the volume. You can feel centered, open your hearts. And here we can move on, okay? Thank you, Bia. Okay, so center yourselves. You can bring an access to your body. And there are English subtitles for those of you who want to continue to watch the meditation.
E aqui está, junto ao Instituto Integral Brasil nesses 10 anos de existência. O Instituto Integral Brasil que desde 2011, vindo através da intenção de Marcelo Cardoso e Delmar Franco, de iniciar a história da teoria integral aqui no Brasil, nesse contexto institucionalizado, com as bênçãos de Ken Wilber, legitimando esse espaço aqui no Brasil com o propósito de agregar a teoria, desenvolver a teoria no nosso solo brasileiro. Quantos já fizeram parte dessa história de cada etapa do Instituto? Quantos foram os momentos que você fez parte dessa história? Quantas foram as oportunidades que o Instituto abriu para que você fizesse parte? E de que maneira você participou desses momentos? Vai tornando tudo isso presente e incluído nessa abertura de caminhos, aonde nós, eu, você e todos os que já deixaram sua marca registrada na história do Instituto e do legado da teoria integral no Brasil, na companhia de Ken Wilber. Traga todos os que são uma referência integral para você, conosco, onde estamos aqui reunidos, como o cosmo inteiro. Eu, tu, nós e ele, celebrando juntos o momento. O momento de nos reconhecermos entrelaçados nessa cada vez mais crescente rede que desponta para o norte de segunda camada. Honrando e agradecendo juntos pela abordagem que nos ensina que tudo tem o seu lugar, de que todos estão certos, que parcialidades são incluídas com integralidade e que abraça 8 bilhões de multidiversidades que estão na espiral do caminho. Se permite então desfrutar desse espaço que marca o instante em que nos encontramos nesse one taste do caminho. Inspirados pela lembrança de Ken, ao nos contagiar com a alegria inerente à própria existência, uma alegria que brota da grande perfeição deste e de todo momento. Em uma série infinita de todos e partes que fluem em cascatas pela eternidade e voltam, sem carências e desejos, pois estão sempre preenchidos pelo fulgor do agora. Que abram os caminhos e vamos celebrar.
Que lindo! Uau! Bem, depois dessa interiorização, eu gostaria de, antes da gente seguir com a nossa programação oficial, chamar o Marcelo Cardoso, fundador e presidente atual do Instituto Integral Brasil, para uma palavra sobre a celebração dos 10 anos do Instituto.
We will call Marcelo Cardoso to talk about the 10 years of the Integral Institute Brazil.
Oi, Bia. Obrigado, Vanessa, por esse espaço.
Hi, Bia. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you. I appreciate this space. I'm very happy to be here after 10 years, 10 years that we started with this dream. And to put in perspective, when the centering reminds us of our connection with Integral, many of you had this experience at some point get in touch with integral, you have this shift of perspective and how you see the world. And that happened with me in 2000 when Dilmar, who is my wife, she gave me the spectrum of consciousness, and she told me to read the chapter about a shadow. I was an executive at an organization, and that moved me a lot. It started to allow me to integrate my journey as a person with my journey as a businessman and a professional. I was there was a brief story of everything translated to Portuguese. So I bought all the books, integral psychology, theory of everything, and I started to translate it to Delmar and trying to connect it with Ken Wilber. And he was not very he was not as being easy to access that point, but we moved trying to connect and connecting with the idea to connect with the organizations with this perspectives of changing organizations, and also with my practices in my life. And from them on, I had this experience in my career to work at Natura, which is a Brazilian company that is very visible here in Brazil. I had the opportunity to do a lot with Integral to bring a lot of people to Brazil, Susan Kudraiker, Ina Sharma, that talks about the stages of consciousness and also polarity with Vina. And after that, Sean, that helped me a lot. At Natura, we had 15 simultaneously projects in Natura. Diane and Patton that is not with us right now. Unfortunately, it's Jeff Salzman that is here. We was in Boulder with Sean and Jeff also. Before the Daily Evolver, that he had this space in Boulder, and so I met him there, and I'm a huge fan of Jeff's work, and to allow this work to come forward to the world. And then I had the privilege to meet Ken Wilber, and from then on, each year I meet with him. The last year was the first year because of the pandemic that I was not able to be present with him. But in 2010, telling him everything that was happening at Natura, I asked him to allow me to have the Integral Institute Brazil here, and he allowed us, and we started just to connect with a person that is holding this space between all the people. There's a lot of people. That one person that I want to name it, how resilient she is, that is Lilian Shibata, how persistent, how resilient she is to hold the space of the Integral Institute Brazil. And we had this beautiful moment in August of 2011 to launch the Institute here in Brazil. And at that point, Sean was here, Terry Patton was just launching the integral, the integral life practices. That was a very special moment. And from them on, things have evolved with ups and downs and all the challenges to have this social organization with this approach. And now we are here. And I think that is a very huge celebration. It's very important. It's very important this moment with the movement here in the world, and the world is more open to the integral in this moment in the world, it's more open to integral. And I think it's in this context that we're only not celebrating, but amplifying this space that the integral might have in society and in Brazil. And in this context, I had the privilege of meeting Ari. I don't even remember which moment. I think was in an event in Instituto Evoluir here, because in how many years we were connected when we had people from outside of Brazil that we had the opportunity to have people in Instituto Evoluir here in Brazil. And in one of these meetings, I met Ari, and when I arrived from the United States with the blessing of Ken to open the Instituto Integral, Ari said that, oh, I think my part is to translate, is to study, but I'm not going to be involved with the getting the institute open, but we have been blessed and had the, the opportunity to have Ari that is so much depth in talking about integral approach. And before listening to Ken, just open the space for Ari, and I'm going to give back to Bia that it's going to call Ari. So let's call Ari, that it's our mentor, our professor, that it's an expert in integral approach from in 29 years giving courses, translating books, coordinating group studies, translating books, articles. So I'm going to call Marcelo to share this place with both of you. So Marcelo also a president of Integral Institute, but also co-creator of Meta Integral and founder of the SHE. So I'm just going to allow you guys to talk and get together. So, hi, Bia, thank you. Thank you, Marcelo, for your so tender words about me. I just want to thank Joe. So you send me flowers with a card in name of the Institute Integral Institute, and that moved me a lot. And I want to appreciate that and appreciate this invitation to be in the celebration here, in this celebration of the Integral Institute Brazil. So a good evening to all. I see that our community is getting bigger and bigger, and this makes me really happy. You don't remember, Marcelo, but I remember when I met you. It was in 2000, you said 2003, but I met you. I had just translated an article of Fred Kaufman, and he came to Brazil to give a lecture in a place here, and I met you there for the first time. Then we spent some times not connected, and then we reconnect through the Institute Evoluir. So I remember this moment. When I was invited to say something here, I didn't know what I was going to say. In a conversation on Friday with a dear friend, Rosangela, she said, Ari, why don't you, what, many people that are going to listen to us, they know the integral theory, but there may be some people that are getting the first touch the first flavor of integral approach. So I'm going just to give a brief a presentation about the integral approach. And it's going to be really brief, and I apologize for those that already know it. This way of thinking has many names, several given by Ken Wilber. So meta theory, integral method theory, or integral approach, or meta integral model. And one of the names that he uses, that I'm going to use it, it's the operational system integral operational system, and the aqual, and the aqual, it's all quadrants, all levels, and highlighting 5 elements of the integral theory, all quadrants, all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all stages, all states, and all types. As human beings, we are a part of this marvelous cosmos, and also mysterious, and we still have much to get to know it. But when we talk about cosmos, the first idea that comes to mind is this material cosmos. We look to the sky, we see the stars, and we see the pictures, and that uh, come from many technologies that broaden and broaden the boundaries of this cosmos for us. But the cosmos that Wilber brings, Wilber was uh, uh, drawing from the Pythagoras theory, and cosmos was formed by 4 big domains: the material domain, the vital domain, the mental, and the spiritual domains. So cosmos for Pythagoras includes everything that exists, not only the material cosmos that we usually refer. And we are part of this cosmos, and that's the point. So what do we do in this cosmos? We live. That's what we do. We live. And if you allow me to bring an analogy from systems theory, to live is to process the cosmos. Uh, that's what we do each second of our lives. We get inputs from this cosmos, we process it, those inputs with our operational system that we don't even know much about it. And then we had this output from in the form of feelings, of thoughts, of actions. That's what we do each moment of our lives. So what the integral thinking from Ken Wilber brings to us, it allows us to know our own operational systems and just operation systems of the cosmos that in many aspects is unknown. So the first step is to allow us to know these operational systems that we live and process and do not know it. So when we start to know the integral theory, we start to locate ourselves in this space of the world, this actual space, and then we can understand where we are at. We can locate ourselves, or we can as Wilber would say, we can know our cosmic address, but this cosmos is in constant evolution, and is within this evolution, everything evolves, including our problems and our operation system. And in a sense, the regular operation systems are not enough to address the problems that we have. And then Ken Wilber asks us to upgrade our systems so we can move from our operational system and move forward to an integral operation systems. And this upgrade is how we, if we could change our codes to enhance our system. And how can we do that? So Wilber helps us and says that in order to upgrade it and transcend our own systems, we have to have practices, an integral approach for our practices in our lives. So if we understand the moment that we are living at, and we start to have an integral approach to our lives, we can upgrade our systems to a more integral system. And that's the invitation that Ken Wilber makes throughout his work. It's not a recipe of a cake or something that I can solve with a recipe, but it's something that we start to do it. But I can tell you that from during these 22 years that I have and a more integral approach practices, my life has been transformed. And that's the invitation to understand it and then to practice as a way of being. And that's what I want to tell to all of you that do not know a lot about the integral theory. And that's the invitation that I would like to do it and to invite you to have your practices and to have your integral practices and move forward in this path. It's a path that it's wonderful that Wilber brought to us. So, Marcelo.
Vamos bater papo aqui, Ari, porque a ideia do sistema operacional é boa, né?
So this this way of thinking, the integral operational system, it's interesting. When I launched the meta management model article in 2013 with Ricardo Ferrer, I never forget, because for me, in my experience, this operational system idea and this idea of stages, we get really excited with the practice. And then we started to think we are in a race. And obviously, I think the world has more aspects of second year than 30 years ago when you started and 20 years ago. So I think there was this idealized way of seeing it. And so we had this conversation, and Susan Greiker was at this conversation that talks about the stages of consciousness. It was a lot of a conversation about how we need more second tier people. And Susan very with a very humble approach said, who are we to guess how the evolution is going to unfold? And I think that connects us with a very powerful way of saying an interview that Ken had. So there's not a lot of thing. There was not a lot of internet available, and the integral naked was not launched yet, and Ken said for the first time we can co-create the emergency of the next step of evolution. So what I would like to explore is just thinking about practice. We're talking about an operational system, but there's not a map, because when we have the head of the engineer, we're going to do the benchmark. Where is the benchmark? We are co-creating the structure and the aspects of this next step of evolution. It's how we practice, but we also touch the mystery and our limitations. And I remember Delmar, it's passionate about shadow. And the first meeting with 2011 with Ken Wilber, Delmar asked, what are the shadows of integral? So there was this idea that the second tier doesn't have shadows. But I think in 2006 in integral spirituality, can you have more depth and it's more precise, but can said that each evolutionary aspect, we are created more aspects that are not integrated and more shadow. So we were creating this version of some stages of development, and Ken Wilber was saying that we should not getting inside a bubble. So it's nice, it's comfortable, but we open a little for the world. I would like Ken to explore this aspect of integral getting an importance in the world. So I would like to ask you, Ari, as your has this depth of the theory, how do you see this challenge of the practice and co-creating this future? Maybe I give an idea that I don't want to give the idea that it's a closed operation system. I don't want to give you, and the practice of integral life, it's not a recipe, it's not something closed. Each one of us, if you want to, it's going to choose and coordinate your own path of practices. So the time, it's a little for us to talk about it. And Wilber has been also evolving with that. I remember when I started to study, there were three models: the mind, the body, and the spirit. And then he introduced the model of the shadow that he understood that was important to work with shadow. And in all the levels, all the stages of consciousness have their own shadow. And then he started with the additional practices, because this first four practices, they talk these individual aspects of development, but we don't leave alone. We are in connection with others, with nature, with cosmos. Then he added this other practices, that it's practices that you connected with others. And then he has this frame that is introduced in integral life practices. And with his creativity, with his imagination, he summarizes with the growing up, that it's the development in the levels, the waking up, that is the development in state, the cleaning up, that is the work with shadow. And then he added the show up, that we have to act. to be present in the 4 quadrants, and finally, and then we open up that to open to new potentials, to new lines of development. And so that summarizes this way of seeing the integral approach to practices. And each one, it's going to co-create your own practices. And then as you move forward with the practices, it no matter which level of consciousness, no matter what line of development or we are, or what consciousness or what practice as a meditation we are, if we have these practices, we are going to accelerate our development, no matter where we are at or in this cosmos, where is our cosmos address. The idea is that we can, all of us can transcend, but this process of evolution is for all. And you know, the grow up, the clean up, wake up, show up, and an open up idea. One of the challenges for people that are listening to us that try to bring the integral approach is there's some people that are very enthusiastic about the theory and see it as a method theory, as a map that can help us. But there's a lot of people that when listen to us resist. And I think for a lot that we do is to bring this experience and to bring the integral approach to organizations. And I think this way of saying the grow up, wake up, show up, and clean up, it's making a lot of sense because you don't have to introduce this theory. So I'm going to repeat, and I'm going to say how I'm bringing this approach to organizations. The practice accelerates the development of consciousness. So this vertical and horizontal development and learning and talking about the organizations is shifting from piling up knowledge. So and moving to grow up is to be able to hold more perspectives of reality, emotionally, to have more wisdom of how to handle your emotions, and then deal with the challenges and the uncertainty of your decisions, and then the cleanup to integrate things that are not conscious. And there are something that is very important with the cleaning up is how you regulate your energy. Has to do with how you sleep and how you eat and how you manage your energy, that you put that in the show up to be open and connected. So it's a more elegant that you don't have to introduce the theory, and makes a lot of sense for organizations, and has more difficult and with the wicked problems that we create. The more traditional way of thinking about the problems, that it's a more elegant way to introduce the theory without necessarily talking about the theory. And I agree with you. And within the organizational field, if you start if we had to start with theory, we wouldn't make it. So if we open a little bit more when you are within the organization. This action has to be more subtle. You don't have to clarify a lot about integral theory, but our life, it's not restricted to our organizational life, but I think it's more deep, because this growing is more in a spiritual levels, that each one of us can find it, and the practices and the integral theory can provide us path to this growing as a spiritual development. And our relationships are with our work, our lives. So that's the period. It's a growth as human beings, as individuals, and as humanity collectively. So, channel Wilber, thank you, Ari. Thank you, Ari. I'm going to change the channel, and we are going to welcome.
Esperar o Ken entrar, né?
Hi, everyone. I think he's still logging on, just a little bit. We have a few questions here. I think I'll take this time to ask a question that people left on the chat here. So let's see to whom is the question. Ari, can you come back and open up your camera, please? Ken is not with us yet. I'll ask Ari to come back so that we can answer the question. I think it's the movie. I don't know if Ari is going to be able to ask this question. I consider the movie of Ken Wilber, if it's already for the public. Yes, it's already on the streaming platforms. If those of you who have Apple, it's not in Brazil, but it's on the streaming platforms. It's Grace and Courage, Grace and Grit, right? Yes, it's a beautiful movie. For those of you who have Apple, I watched by Apple. It's a beautiful movie. I think it's still not with Portuguese subtitles, but there are subtitles in Spanish. I think there was another question, if I'm not mistaken. Let me know when Ken is here, okay? I will. Well, I'd like to thank you, both of you, for the interaction. That was amazing. Our chat here, it's, everybody's speaking very highly of you. You were amazing. So it was truly a wonderful interaction that you had. We have a few questions. Oh, I found the question. For Marcelo and Ari. Ari, if you can answer. Do you know good applications of the integral theory in schools and the teaching institutions? Tomorrow, Elo is going to present an education program, an integral education for public schools. Elo is going to show Vivecer. It's the program. Excellent event, congratulations. Marcelo. Let's see if our guest is here. Thiago Mota asking how the integral theory helps in our tired society. I think the point that Ari brought, I think it's the most important thing in the integral theory, which is to touch this spiritual place in this cosmos address, to rest in the absolute, which transcends all the distractions. Another question. This is complex. Let's see. We can start to answer, but if Ken comes in, we stop. Okay, Camila, and then we'll come back. Why is the presupposition that the world is an evolution, and how to understand the traditional cultures, the original peoples in this context? I don't know if you'd like to begin, Ari, and then if Ken comes here, we interrupt that, and then we can continue afterwards.
Posso falar, não sei se o Ari está ouvindo, posso falar
I don't know
pouco
if Ari is listening to me. I can talk about it a bit, Camila. Actually, there is this presupposition of evolution in the original peoples. They have their knowledge, but their wisdom.
Marcelo, eu estou
Oh,
ouvindo, mas
Marcelo, I can
tem
hear you.
som aqui, tá
But there's
som
a
em cima do
sound
outro. Eu
here on
confesso
top
que
of
eu estou
another. I
tendo uma
confess that I'm a bit
dificuldade para ouvir. Eu
lost.
já botei o
It's
off,
hard to
botei o
hear. I
English, o
put off,
português
I put
fica
the
sempre a
in.
mesma coisa.
It's always the same thing. Would you like to put off? And maybe you can continue Portuguese. Eu acho que você está ouvindo a minha tradução. É só você colocar interpretation off.
Eu coloco, mas eu continuo ouvindo a sua tradução.
I'm still hearing your translation. That's funny.
Eu confesso que eu digo isso tudo para vocês, porque como eu sou surdo, eu já tenho uma
You know,
dificuldade.
I'm deaf, so it's already hard for me to understand.
Agora mesmo, eu estou falando e já
Now I'm speaking and you're speaking English. Você está no canal de inglês, Ari. É só você tirar da interpretação.
Então, você pode ficar no canal
And what I'm saying is being translated into English. And there's a delay.
Talvez é melhor sair e voltar, e enquanto isso...
Não, eu estou no canal de off.
Você entra no canal português.
Vai continuar a mesma coisa.
It's still going to be the same thing. I'm still going to listen to you.
Carolina está dizendo que você está no canal de...
Carolina is saying that you're in the English channel. You have to click on the interpretation off. I'm clicking here on the globe.
Bem, gente, então vamos fazer o seguinte.
Okay, well, can I be on the mute and I won't join the conversation? I can be on the mute.
Obrigada, Ari. Vamos fazer
All right, thank you, Ari. Well,
enquanto a gente aguarda
while we wait for Ken Wilber,
provavelmente aqui se conectando,
he's probably here connecting,
pro nosso técnico
still joining us. I'll ask our tech host, Rafael, to leave a screen and we'll try to get in touch with him. And then we can have a little break that was supposed to be after Ken, but we will do that now so that we can use our hour that we have with Ken Wilber, and then we can anticipate our break, okay? So let us watch, stretch our legs a bit, get some water, and then when Ken joins us, we can resume our conference. Okay, is that okay for you? All right, Rafa. So can you please put the screen for us? Thank you.
Olá, pessoal, vamos voltando
Hello,
devagar.
everyone. Let's come back little by little. Our guest is already around. He's about to come. So, who's on YouTube and on Zoom, you can already connect and log on again because Marcelo will welcome our Ken and Wilber. Marcelo, you have the floor.
Tô com o Ken aqui, ele está tentando se conectar na outra
I
linha.
have Ken here. He's trying to join another line. Just a minute bit more. Everyone.
Olá.
Hello, everyone. Marcelo.
Oi, Bia.
Hi, Bia. Hi. Ken is as a participant, and we will need to ask him a favor. He needs to accept an invitation from our tech host. He's raising his hand. I think he has a technical issue, so that he can accept the invitation to join as a panelist for our transmission. So Ken, I think you need to accept an invitation.
Ah, meu Deus.
Vamos lá. Ken, nós precisamos que você
Ken,
saia.
we need you to leave the event. Yeah, I'm taking care of that. All right. Okay, Marcelo, thank you.
Yeah. Hey.
Chegou.
Hey.
Hello, Ken. Hello, my friend.
Yes, nice to see you all.
Good to see you. Great to have you. Thank God technology help us. So, Ken, we are so happy to have you here, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so nice. We have hundreds of people just showing up to hear from you. I was just sharing to people 10 years ago when you blessed us to have a II chapter in Brazil, and it's been 10 years now.
Yeah.
And it seems Integral it's in this best moment, and that's what I'd like to invite you to enlighten us on. And so talking a little bit why Integral is taking more traction in the world right now.
Yep.
And how you see the challenge and everything going on, and how you see Integral unfolding and everything. So we are yours. Enlighten us.
That's the areas I've covered.
Yeah. So please talk to us. We are more than happy to have you here. You know that here in Brazil, we are facing even deeper challenges because we have our own version of Trump right now in the politics. We have the Amazon burning and all the biggest challenges and the pandemic. So pretty much everything that you want to cover, we are here.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started.
Great.
So shall I just start?
Yes, please do that.
Okay. I've been asked if I would talk briefly about how I see the future of integral, both what I would like to happen and what I think will happen. I'll be glad to make a few comments on each of those.
Yes, of course, Ken, please.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
We're having a problem in our feed mechanism.
Oh, I see. It's my first time seeing you on your read, so.
Will it continue? Okay.
Might be too fast.
What I'd like to see happen is that the integral framework continue to be expanded and explained. By expanded, I mean
Hold on.
we're still having some feed problems.
No worries.
All right. What I'd like to see happen is that the integral framework continue to be expanded and explained. By expanded, I mean to keep including new areas and fields that it can cover. I've already included such areas as waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up. Allow me to briefly explain what each of those areas means. Waking up is an experience variously known as enlightenment, awakening, satori, metamorphosis, fauna, transformation, the great liberation, the supreme identity. Today, this experience is fairly well known, and many of you are already practicing some form of this waking up with Zen Buddhism, Vedanta Hinduism, Sufism, Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, Neoplatonism, or some such. It's generally understood that to have a waking up experience or satori means that you have a direct experience of being one with the entire world. You are no longer identified with just your skin encapsulated ego, but rather reach out and feel your true self is one with everything. As a Zen master put it, a human being's true body is the universe. There are many different schools of this, each of them encompassing practices that help a person to let go of their small individual self and indeed expand their awareness to a oneness with the entire universe. This also means that a person moves beyond any suffering or pain or torment that is caused by being identified with just their small, separate, set-apart self. For example, the original aim of Gautama Buddha's spiritual approach was to end all dukkha or suffering altogether, which was achieved by taking up a meditation practice that aimed for the transcendence of all thought forms. And since the ego is basically a product of thought, to go beyond thought was to go beyond the ego, and thus discover a pure nirvana of a blissful oneness with the all. But whatever the specific practice is, this process of waking up is clearly an important part of any genuinely integral framework. In fact, many traditions actually refer to the knowledge that this waking up gives somebody as being an ultimate truth compared to the relative truth that other disciplines are involved with. Many of these traditions call this the two truths doctrine because these two truths are included, ultimate truth and relative truth. Ultimate truth is called an ultimate truth because it is said to give a person access to an infinite ground of all being, which underlies and gives reality to all of the finite things and events in existence, which themselves underlie and give rise to various relative truths. These relative truths includes ones such as those of science, like chemistry or biology or physics or astronomy or sociology. But because this waking up does give a person a direct experience of this infinite ground of being, which is one and the same in all beings, this is exactly why a person can actually have a real experience of being one with everything. It's because they are one with this all-inclusive ground that they can indeed have a real experience of being one with everything. However important these waking up processes are, they do have their limitations. First among these is that this ultimate truth doesn't really tell you very much about any of the relative truths found in the ordinary world. Nothing much at all about chemistry or biology or physics or astronomy or sociology or computer science. For example, we have instances of this waking up experience going back several thousand years in our history. So imagine someone who was practicing one of these waking up schools, say 4,000 years ago, and they're taking a walk through the local woods, and all of a sudden, pow, they have a real satori, a real waking up experience. They feel that they are one with the earth, one with the sun, one with all the trees and the forests. They're one with everything. But notice, since it's 4,000 years ago, they're one with the earth, but they still think that the earth itself is flat. And they're one with the sun, but they still think that the sun circles the earth. And they're one with all the trees and the woods, but they don't get any information at all about the atoms or molecules or cells in any of the trees. In other words, their experience of ultimate truth doesn't tell them anything at all about any relative truth. So the societies that first had these waking up practices almost all had some form of slavery. Also, women were usually second-class citizens, and science itself was not invented in its modern form, which first came into existence in 1605 with Galileo and Kepler and Newton. So this ultimate truth of being one with everything, because it is basically plugging you straight to an infinite ground of all being, which is the same in a rock, a frog, a tree, a human being. And because it's exactly the same ground in all of them, it cannot tell you anything specific about any of them. It gives you no relative truths at all. And this can't even tell you that slavery is wrong. As Thomas Sowell, the great Black historian, pointed out, Christian monasteries had slaves, Buddhist monasteries had slaves, and he would add, so did most of the great religions the world over. St. Paul counsels to, quote, obey your master and love Jesus Christ. Even American Indians had slaves. They even took their slaves with them on the Trail of Tears. However much they might have been plugged into ultimate truth in their spirituality, they knew very little about relative truth. So there are some limitations to this ultimate truth that we want to be aware of. And one of the ways that Integral does this is that it fully acknowledges that a real waking up can make you one with the entire world. It can fully integrate ultimate and relative, emptiness and form, heaven and earth, infinite and finite. But it can tell you little about relative truths, little about the finite things that exist. So we intentionally pay attention to the relative truths that exist, and we especially try to include and integrate all of them. And of the 5 major areas of the integral framework that I just listed, waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up, while waking up does indeed cover ultimate truth, fully 5 of them cover some area of relative truth. So growing up, for example, covers the various stages of growth and development that all human beings go through in the development of their relative self. The developmental sequence of the stages that all humans grow through includes stages that become increasingly whole or holistic, or in some sense more inclusive than their predecessor, so that the entire sequence is a series of increasing wholeness in the relative or finite realms. It moves from stages that are egocentric or selfishly oriented through stages that expand to include ethnocentric or group-oriented, to stages that expand again to include world-centric or all groups, which is the attempt to treat all people fairly, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed, to stages that finally expand to integral, or ones that integrate all previous stages into a yet larger wholeness. You can see each stage becoming more inclusive and more holistic. And by the way, the stage called world-centric, which does indeed try to treat all people fairly, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed, might sound so common and so obvious that you think it has been around forever and it's hardly worth mentioning on its own. But in fact, the world-centric is a very recent stage of human development. If Homo sapiens have been on the earth for, say, 300,000 years, we only reached a truly world-centric stage around 300 years ago, which is the emergence of a relative truth that brought with it the emergence of all the modern sciences, modern physics, modern chemistry, modern biology, modern astronomy, and so on. And this world-centric rational approach to reality also meant that period around 300 years ago was also the first time in history that we actually outlawed slavery. And around a 100-year period, from 1770 to 1870, we finally outlawed slavery in every rational industrial country on the face of the planet, the first time anything like that had ever occurred in all of our history. In today's world, this rational world-centric stage tends to occur in adolescence, but it is indeed a very recent emergent reality. And it took most of humanity's entire history to produce it. After all, as I said, in our roughly 300,000 years on this planet, the world-centric stage only emerged worldwide around 300 years ago. So it was only 300 years ago that we figured out that one person owning another person was a bad thing. If you think about anything in history, think about that. This growing up area is an area of several stages or levels of development. As we saw, they move from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to integral, with each of those stages encompassing a larger wholeness than its predecessor. But these levels of development each have many different lines of development that are growing through them. Some of these lines are called multiple intelligences. The reason they are called that, multiple intelligences, is because human beings don't have just one intelligence, usually called cognitive intelligence and measured by the all-important IQ test. They actually have up to around a dozen or so multiple intelligences. So in addition to cognitive intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, moral intelligence, social intelligence, aesthetic intelligence, spiritual intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, kinesthetic or body intelligence, spatial intelligence, mathematical intelligence, and musical intelligence, among others. What we want to do with these multiple intelligence is, first of all, to recognize each of them in ourselves and to fully open up to all of them. And we call this process, appropriately enough, opening up. Many people don't even know that they have all of these intelligences, and thus they never think about using most of them. What we want to do is to open up to all of them, to recognize that we have each and every one of them available to us, and to thus open up to our own smart intelligence. The average person is at least 12 times smarter than they think, and they'll understand this if they open up to all of their multiple intelligences. There's another area of these relative truths, and that's the area that we call cleaning up. This refers to a therapeutic process of undoing or healing the repressions that we have used to dissociate, split, and fragment our minds, producing many shadow elements or unconscious and repressed aspects of our psyche. This is often associated, of course, with the name of Sigmund Freud and his inner circle of associates, all of whom are bona fide geniuses: Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, Otto Rank, and Salvador Ferenczi. The discoveries that this crew made have indeed changed the very way that we think about human beings. It's said that with Copernicus and Darwin, Freud's thought were one of the three most influential ideas in human history. All of them changed profoundly how we view ourselves. What Freud and his associates discovered is that because the human mind has a very long history, as we said, some 300,000 years just for Homo sapiens, and going back almost 1 million years for the forerunners of Homo sapiens. So the mind still has some very primitive regions. In addition to one minute, we're having some problems with the teleprompter. Technical problems. What are you going to do? Back a little farther. Let's start there.
Okay.
What Freud and his associates discovered is that because the human mind has a very long history, as we said, some 300,000 years just for Homo sapiens, and going back almost 1 million years for the forerunners of Homo sapiens. So the mind still has some very primitive regions. In addition to our conscious selves, our ego, or our I sense, our mind has a large area, or an id region, which is still very old and primitive. What's more, we can push much of our ego or I out of our conscious mind and shove it into this very primitive id, or unconscious region. And the aim of Freud's new psychoanalysis is to take this repressed material back and reunite it with the conscious self, or I. Thus, when Freud was asked what was the aim of his psychoanalysis, he very famously replied, Where it was, their ego shall be, which is really perfect, except Freud never actually said that. Most people don't know that Freud never once used the terms ego or id. Those terms, which are Latin, were used by his translator, James Strachey, because they thought they would make Freud sound more scientific. The terms that Freud actually used were the real pronouns for the I and the it. And the I was what Strachey translated as the ego, and the it is what he translated as the id. So Freud himself would never say derivatives of the id can harm the ego, although that is how he would be translated. What he would actually say is derivatives of the it can harm the I. So he wrote and spoke just like that. So he never said where it was, their ego shall be. What he literally said was, where it is, their I shall become. That was really brilliant. And it really did summarize what psychoanalysis was actually doing. It was looking for some of the dissociated and alienated shadow elements that were split off from the self or the I and shoved into this great it region. Every time this happened, it created a painful neurotic symptom, such as depression or anxiety or obsession. And the symptom itself was often described by the suffering person in third person it terms. The anxiety, I can't control it. The depression, it just comes over me. This obsession, it is more than I can stand, and so on. So the cure that Freud discovered was where it was, there I shall become. You could see how this, where it was, I shall become, actually worked in practice if you watched any of Fritz Perls' Gestalt therapy sessions. Perls was a huge star at the Gross Center Esalen Institute, where he practiced the form of therapy he had invented called Gestalt therapy, which was, in a sense, a modern successor to psychoanalysis. Perls famously declared that I can cure any neurosis in 15 minutes. And the thing is, that was very nearly the truth. He would have the person with their neurosis sit in a chair with an empty chair sitting in front of them. Then he would have the person imagine that their neurosis was actually sitting in the empty chair, and then engage in a dialogue with it. That is, engage their neurotic symptom in a real conversation, literally talk with it. So say this person had a lot of anger, but they had repressed their anger and then projected it onto other people. So they would then no longer feel that they have any anger, but they feel that other people are angry at them. So they start to feel a real fear, a lot of it. So instead of their anger, they have fear. They also start to have bad nightmares, marked by a very angry monster that is chasing them and trying to kill them. And they wake up in fear, in cold sweat, and breathing really hard. Perls would have them put that monster in the empty chair and talk with it. The point here is that the monster is the direct result of the person's repressing their anger. So their anger all shows up on the monster. You can see the person's anger in the monster itself. It's so angry that it wants to actually kill the person. And all the person has is a bunch of fear, which is what you will tend to feel when other people all seem to be really angry at you. Especially since you don't have any anger yourself to respond to them, since you've repressed all your anger, and it's now showing up in these people who are angry at you, and so you feel fear. So Perls sat them in a chair and asked them to put the monster in the empty chair and talk with it. And each time the person is supposed to play the monster that is responding. So they actually take the role of the monster when they ask it questions and then it answers it. So They might start out by saying, "Why are you here?" And the monster says, "I want to kill you." "Why do you want to kill me?" "Because you can never do anything right." And on like that. Of course, to hear how much anger the monster has for them makes the person initially feel nothing but more fear. But as the conversation continues to unfold and the person himself starts to play the monster, it becomes increasingly obvious that what the monster is very angry at the person. And the more that the person identifies with the monster in the dialogue, the more the person starts to directly become aware of that anger. After all, they're playing the monster. And so when they feel what the monster wants, they're feeling anger in themselves. After 10 or 15 minutes of this, it becomes obvious to everybody in the room just what this person's neurosis is made of. And it's made of his own projected anger, which the person more and more directly realizes himself. Thus, the person can take back and re-own their own anger. And as they do so, the amount of their fear decreases dramatically. Their own anger, which was projected as an it belonging to others, but not me, is taken part of their own self or I. Hence, where it was, there I shall become. And thus Pearls has cured another neurotic in 15 minutes. There are today many different forms of cleaning up that have descended from Freud's pioneering efforts. Psychoanalysis is certainly one of them, but it may be included with many other approaches. Some of our practitioners actually use psychoanalysis. Some actually use Gestalt therapy itself, or any number of other of today's many approaches to cleaning up. I have my own personal favorites, but what matters most is not which form of cleaning up that you use, but that you include some form of legitimate cleaning up in your own approach to integral practice. Showing up is also a very important area of integral studies, since it addresses the major dimensions and perspectives that we have available to us with which to approach the world. We call these various dimension perspectives by the name the four quadrants, and the point is it's important to show up for all of them. Thus, the four quadrants include the inside and the outside of the individual and the collective. In other words, the subjective and objective of the individual and the group. We maintain that all existing things, or all holons, including all individuals and all collectives, have all four of these dimensions in their own makeup. We say the quadrants go all the way up and all the way down. This means that all quarks, all atoms, all molecules, all cells, and all multicellular organisms, plants to fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals to primates to humans, all of them have the four quadrants. They all possess an interior or subjective component or some form of prehension or awareness, an objective component or some form of space-time, mass energy, outer form, in an individual or an individual holon, as well as a collective or some type of social culture or group form. This solves an enormous number of recalcitrant problems, including the mind-body problem and the problem of social cohesion. So the point of showing up means to show up for or to include all four of these quadrants in any of our ideas about what reality is actually like. That's rather the point with all of the four quadrants. Although there are many different approaches that are included in each quadrant, it's not so important which of those approaches you actually use. What is important is that you include at least one major legitimate approach to each of the quadrants. So you want to include some form of waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up. My hope for the future of integral is that scholars continue to look for other major areas that need to be included. That is, the 5 major elements of the integral approach: quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. That we continue to look for areas that these elements apply to, as they apply to each of the areas that I just described. In other words, in addition to waking up, growing up, opening up, cleaning up, and showing up, are there any other major areas that need to be included and that can be covered by these 5 elements? And if we find some area that is not covered by these 5 elements, then what extra elements do we need to add? And then by all means, add those new elements to the integral framework. I'm not in any way massively attached to the integral framework as it is now. I'm perfectly willing to change it in any way that future evidence is found to indicate that some sort of change is needed. As for what I think the future will be for integral, I'm actually quite optimistic. The reason that I am concerns the actual demographics of today's population. In the growing up sequence of development, the world-centric stage actually contains 2 major stages: the Orn, modern, rational stage, and the green, postmodern, pluralistic, or relativistic stage. The orange, modern, rational stage is the largest stage, with around 40% or so of the population. The green postmodern stage is the leading edge of development, with around 23% of the population. Orange and green are the 2 highest stages in what are called first-tier development. All first-tier stages are marked by the belief that their truth and values are the highest truth and values in existence. All others are goofy, silly, childish, or just plain wrong. Thus, there's a constant conflict between all of these first-tier stages. But then there is the leap to second-tier or integral stages, which Claire Graves called monumental and a cataclysmic leap in meaning. The reason is that the integral stages are the first stages in all of development that think that all of the previous stages have importance and significance, if for no other reason than that they are all steps or stages in overall human development. And thus all of them are needed. Just as you can't go from atoms to cells and skip molecules, you can't go from egocentric to world-centric and skip ethnocentric. Thus, each and every stage of growing up is definitely important and is needed. But notice the leap from first-tier to second-tier stages. All of the first-tier stages think that their truth and values are the only real truth and values in existence. Thus, none of them are what we would call holistic or all-inclusive stages. If anything, they're basically the opposite. They don't want to include or integrate other stages. They want to get rid of them. But the leap to integral second-tier stages do want to include and integrate the other stages. And they do so in their own makeup, which is often called systemic or integrated or inclusive, to indicate this fact. But notice that all first-tier stages do not consciously include or integrate any of the previous stages. In fact, the highest of them, the green or relativistic pluralistic postmodern stage, which is indeed the leading edge stage of our postmodern world, is called things like pluralistic or relativistic because it explicitly divides the world up into many different multicultural separate divisions and can't find any way to integrate any of them. Hence the massive polarization and tribalization in today's world, which leading edge is green, postmodern, pluralistic. The integral second-tier stages, on the other hand, explicitly do include and integrate all of the previous stages. Hence, they're being called integrated or integral or systemic stages. In today's world, depending on which model of development you use. There are around 5 to 7% of the population at an integral stage. We find generally that when any stage of development reaches around 10% of the population, there's a type of cultural tipping point that occurs. What happens then is that the values of that stage start to permeate and circulate throughout the culture. The culture at large starts to become more open to these values, at least in a general fashion. But at 10%, their values become so significant that when historians look back and name the period where this happens, they usually name it after the values of this stage. Thus, for example, when 10% of the population in Europe reached the Orange Modern Rational stage around 1600 CE, this era in general was called the Age of Reason, even though only around 10% of the population were actually at the rational stage of reason. Likewise, in 1960, when 10% of the population reached the green postmodern relativistic stage, this became known as the postmodern age. And it still is, with over 23% of the leading edge of development now at postmodern pluralistic relativistic. This postmodern stage is still the leading edge of development in the West. But notice the next stage that is coming up, namely the second tier integral stage. Right now, as I indicated, somewhere around 5 to 7% of the population is at this integral stage. But that's getting very close to 10%. And when an integral stage does reach that 10%, we can expect to see a massive and major transformation in society as integral becomes the major leading edge of evolution. When that happens, integral values will replace postmodern relativistic values at the culture's leading edge. And years from now, when historians look back on this time, they will call it the integral age. When this happens, it will be one of the most significant changes in all of human history. Humans have never had a major value system that sought to include and integrate all of the different values in their culture. They've always had a leading edge that was first tier, and it sought to make their own values the only values in their culture. By their very structure, they were incapable of including and integrating all of the other value structures in their society. Whether it was the Middle Ages with their mythic Christian value structures, which brought before the Inquisition anybody who strongly disagreed with them, to the Age of Reason with its scientific belief structure that tried to make it alone the one true belief in society. The leading edge of culture at every point in history tried to bend the entire culture to its will because they were first stage structures. That will stop with the integral age. The leading edge question will no longer be, I alone have truth, how can I get rid of all of the others? It will instead switch to something like, how can I include and integrate all the other major belief systems? A truly integral approach. And that will change dramatically our entire culture to being the first culture in our entire history that was truly all-inclusive and integrated. I mean, can you imagine? We don't know how exactly long it will take to get an integral stage at the very leading edge of cultural evolution. That is to say, 10%. I would estimate anywhere from 10 to 30 years. But when it occurs, it will change the very nature of human beings themselves. 10% of the population, especially when it's the leading edge of culture itself, has a profound impact on the rest of the population, particularly when, being the highest or leading edge stage of the culture, it attracts the most developed and evolved people in the culture. They are the ones that are valedictorians and get college scholarships. They are the ones in the most highly regarded professions. They're the doctors, the lawyers, the financial gurus. They set the tone for leading edge fashion and architecture and music and literature. I mean, just look at the impact of the scientific revelation or the postmodern era itself. So I don't know exactly when the integral age will begin, but I do know that whatever the nature of the change in human nature itself that will occur, a significant part of that will be to embrace integral theories. The most highly respected theories in existence will be some form or another of integral theories. We know this with a great deal of certainty, since all we have to do today is study what the next stages in human development look like. These overall stages themselves have been tested in over 40 different cultures worldwide, and no exception to their basic forms or sequences have been found. We already saw the sequence egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to integral. A slightly more detailed sequence is given by the genius developmentalist Gene Gebser. His stage sequence was archaic to magic to mythic to rational to pluralistic to integral stages of development. We have already evolved through enough of those stages so that 23% of the population is at the pluralistic stage and 7% at the integral stage. And we know that so far, there have been no exceptions to those stages. Some developmentalists include more stages in their sophisticated models, but even those stages are clearly following that general sequence. So if we want to know what major stage of development will succeed the postmodern pluralistic stage, all we have to do is look at what the stage is that follows the pluralistic postmodern stage in today's models. And lo and behold, it's the integrated or integral or systemic stage of development. This is true whether we use Piaget's model, where his notebooks include a major stage following formal operational cognition, which he called systemic, or whether we use Levenger's model, whose highest stage is called integrated, or Maslow's stages, where the stage after self-esteem is called self-actualization, which is thoroughly holistic and integrated. Claire Graves, whose highest stage is systemic integrated. Robert Keegan, whose highest stage is integrated inter-individual. Erich von Neumann, ego-self integration, and so on through dozens of developmental models. There is simply no longer a major question in developmental circles about this. In a book called Integral Psychology, I included charts of over 100 different developmental models, and these essential sequences could be spotted in the vast majority of all of them. What we see when we look at any of these models is that an integral stage is just that. It has many internal structures that directly aim for adopting theories and models that are indeed integrative or integral in their nature. This is exactly the structure that integral meta-theory has. Thus, what I predict happening in the near future is that as more and more of the population actually themselves enter an integral stage, there will be a large increase in the number of people that are attracted to integral meta-theory. Now, in today's world, the integral model has already found a fairly large following, from academia to politics to Hollywood to the average individual who simply wants to make sense out of the world. I'm very satisfied with the popularity that integral has achieved in today's world. I actually read somewhere that with almost 36 books published in up to 30 foreign languages, I was the most widely published academic author in America. I don't know if that's literal true, but I'm sure it's close. And integral reaches this popularity by swimming upstream. That is, with only 7% or so of today's population at an integral stage, and the leading edge being at postmodern pluralistic, with 23% of the population, and with all of the power that comes from being a leading edge, the integral approach has had to fight uphill against that power. The leap to second tier integral stages is indeed monumental and cataclysmic. And psychologically, it takes somebody with a truly strong psyche and strong interest in integral to be able to make that monumental leap. So I can only imagine the help that the integral model will get when an integral stage is itself the leading edge in Western culture, and we don't have to fight so hard to beat the postmodern multiplistic stage itself. So with all of the developmental evidence that is available today, we can say with a great deal of certainty that if today's world is postmodern, with a leading edge of green pluralistic, tomorrow's world will definitely be an integral age with a leading edge of integral stages. So that is what I'm expecting tomorrow to be like. I very much am looking forward to this tomorrow. And not only because it will likely announce a very strong interest in integral meta theory, but simply because of the type of world that will become available to everybody who's alive. It will, after all, indeed be an integral age, where the primary question that society will be asking is something like, how can I include and integrate all the other major belief systems? We human beings have never lived in a culture that is that inclusive. And especially when you compare that with the postmodern world, whose top values are claimed to be diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and which can deliver on none of them. It doesn't want diversity, it wants everybody to agree with them. It doesn't really want equity or equality, since it actually excludes people who disagree with them. And it can't provide inclusivity because it can't include anybody who does disagree with them. But in a truly integral age, those values will all be automatically included and real versions of those values. It will want a true diversity, including all of the truly diverse and different stages of a real growing up. And it will definitely include a real equality, because every stage of growing up or difference in value structure will be automatically and equally included. And thus it will finally have a real inclusivity, since that's the strong feature of any integral stage. So a truly integral stage will be a real boon for humanity, and that makes me very happy. That many of them will be adopting an integral framework is simply the icing on the cake. Okay, everybody, that's it for me. I truly appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to be with us. And thanks in particular go to Integral Brazil for being among the true forerunners of tomorrow's integral age and adopting the integral model over 10 years ago. I'm deeply appreciative. Goodbye, everybody, and please take care. This is Ken.
Hey, Ken, thank you very much. We are so touched here. We love you. We've been touching. So we had more than 400 people showing up and listening and watching for you. So thank you very much.
Great.
So
okay, y'all. We'll see you.
All right.
See you, Ken. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bom, hein, pessoal? Bia, você tá aí?
Well, Bia, are you there? I'm here. That was amazing, right?
Muito incrível. Vamos continuar, já que a gente fez o break.
Since we had a break, let's continue, right? Let's continue. So yes, now we are going to our next session. So Marcelo, to continue, I'm going to ask you to call Ben and Jeff Salzman, and you can welcome them, please. Bence and Jeff, come on. Marcelo is going to introduce you to our panel.
Hello, Jeff. Hello,
Hi,
Ben.
Jeff. Hi, Bence.
Hello.
So honored to have you both here. So I'm just going to do a quick intro, but I'll let you guys to introduce yourselves. So when you thought about this event, I really thought that it would be great to have both of you and perhaps me bringing perspectives from Brazil and what's going on with Integral here. So Jeff, I've been following. So we met in Boulder a while ago. It was exactly the same moment that I met Ken for the first time, and he blessed us to opening up the Integral chapter here in Brazil. And then I've been following you since then. You are a pioneer, and I'm really amazed with the work you've been doing with Stephen McIntosh and holding the torch of Integral. And also you, Bence, so you are growing Integral in Europe. I'm so glad to be in the conference in the last 2 years that are online. And I really like to have you talking a little bit about what's going on there and how we can, the three of us, we can talk and connect. So I'd like to ask you first, Jeff, to introduce yourself, how Integral is present in your life, and then I'll ask Bence. Again, thank you very much, Jeff.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Marcelo, and congratulations on 10 years and moving the ball in South America and Brazil. I'm just having a beautiful buzz from having listened to Ken and have him talk about the integral age. And I came to Integral because of Ken. I had always been a seeker, and one time I walked into a bookstore and I saw a book that said Up from Eden. I'd never heard of him. I had kissed all kinds of frogs being in Boulder and trying to testing all sorts of spiritualities and worldviews. And the idea that we had come up from Eden, that there has been a developmental move in the cosmos that ends up with us, it was just thrilling. And that was when I got into Integral. I read everything Ken had written. I had no idea he lived 4 miles from me. He was just sort of a disembodied master to me. And through a series of coincidences, I guess, Ken found out about me. I found out about him. We had lunch. And I couldn't believe my luck. I was in the position of having just sold a business. I needed something to do. I was 40 something. And together we worked on the series of Integral Institute seminars where we did integral psychotherapy, integral business, and integral life practice, and really in a way built the original integral community. People came from all over the world to these seminars. And, I was a devotee. I am a devotee of Ken's. And I love how Ken frames that, because he says, I'm not a teacher. I'm not going to take on your karma. Right? Okay. But I'll be your pandit. I'll teach you everything I know. And working with Ken, there was that feeling of one log lighting the other. And I got lit up by Ken. And so anyway, I'm having a little bit of a buzz there, but I dedicated my life to Integral. I started the Boulder Integral Center with some other people here in Boulder, and that's where you came, Marcelo. It was an actual old church that we bought, and we had all sorts of trainings for actually 15 years. Just closed it about 2 years ago. And then doing the Daily Evolver for 10 years, where I attempt to do two things. One is to explore current events and use current events to explain integral theory. And on the other hand, to use integral theory to explain and illuminate current events. And so that's why I'm excited to be here tonight and to be with you, Marcelo, and you, Bence. Because I love what you said at the very beginning, Marcelo, when you said the development of Integral on Brazilian soil. I love that. I want to know what that means. And also, Bence, what you're doing with the European, and which is really global, and we're all global. But, yes. That's where I am in this moment, just being really curious about that and how it's manifesting in real time.
This is great. Thank you, Jeff. I'm really keen to share I think it was 2014, we invited Ken to do a talk. And actually at that time in Brazil, we have the Brazilian flag when there are two words, it's order and progress. And then this was, it came from the Auguste Comte, the philosopher, French philosopher from the positivism. And then the actual sentence is love as a principle, order as a means, and order as a basis, and progress as a means, as an end. And then it was beautiful that Ken, just because, and right now there is in Brazil this movement to bring love to the Brazilian flag. And this is beautiful with that Ken just frame in an integral way that law. So you have order and progress, which is the movement of the evolution. So the kind of chaos and order, organized and disorganized, this every dance of the universe, but we create and drive the dance is the erotic movement of love. It's love penetrating everything. And so that's how he frames. So that's I can talk a little bit about Brazil and what's going on here, and how we are trying to bring integral into Brazilian soul and Brazilian soil. But let me ask you, Bence, a little bit about, introduce yourself and what's going on for you, man.
Hi, Marcelo. Thank you for inviting me too. And hello, Jeff. It's lovely to be together again. And my story with integral starts in 1996, when I have found Ken Wilber's work right in the middle of Europe in Budapest, Hungary. And at that time, it was completely unknown. But I had a personal transpersonal psychotherapist, mentor, guru figure in Budapest who was teaching all people who wanted something more than traditional psychology. And he was trained in the 80s in the Bay Area and met all the players and all the movements there. And he had Ken Wilber in my country of origin. So when I asked him, who do you think the best is in America now to read, to study? He just picked brief history of everything from Ken, and I had this experience of finding it finally. So I already carried the integral need, the integral mentality, an integral heart that wants to encompass everybody and everything, and somehow create an integrated system of it all, and cannot settle for less than an integrated system. So that was my moment of finding it, and it put me straight into an integral path. So I felt that this is what I want to do in my whole life. And basically, I haven't found anything better yet since. So I'm still on the integral path, and it feels like I'm going to be forever. And I also dedicated my career for this. So when I finished studying psychology in Budapest University, and then did my clinical psychologist training, I just kept being an integral psychologist in this country, creating Integral Academy in 2006, 15 years ago. That's basically the biggest integral school in Hungary and in Europe, which is thoroughly and rigorously teaching Wilber's integral, the 5 branches of integral, the stages, the quadrants, the lines, the states and types, for 3 years. And it also trains integral counselors, basically integral psychotherapists. So it's a very strong movement in this country. And in 2012, we teamed up with other European integral colleagues who had already had at least 10 years prior history with integral, and decided to create a European movement, a European integral network. And I offered to organize a conference for this. That was the first Integral European Conference, IEC, in 2014. And Jeff was invited as a keynote speaker, among many others. We had a great time. And immediately 500 people flew in from around 35 countries. And since then, we just kept doing the IECs, the Integral European Conferences, in 2016, 2018. By 2018, half of the people who came were outside of Europe, so it grew into a global conference. And because of COVID, we couldn't, the next scheduled conference was for 2020. That's when COVID hit in. So we put it online to wait until the next chance to have the next live conference. So 2020 and 2021 was online. And now we are planning, we just launched in our newsletter to head for 2022, which hopefully will be the next live in-person conference. And if not, if COVID would still win, then we just do it online again. And I'm sure that COVID will go sooner than us. So there will be a live conference. Well, we would like to have you, Marcelo, as we were already talking about it also, as a main speaker. So that's my brief story. And I also spent 7 years in the United States and became a US citizen. So that's when I spent a lot of time with Jeff and others in Boulder Integral Center in the Bay Area and meeting Ken a lot. So that's also part of my story.
This is great, Bence. So yeah, we hope we can be in person in May. So this is, yeah. So Jeff, I think one of 2 or 3 episodes ago on the Daily Evolve, we were talking about the momentum of Integral and how Integral is kind of more ready. So you were in the beginning of the movement when the idea was to have the Integral go into the academia, and now it seems that we are reaching a different momentum that was expected to happen 20 years ago. How are you seeing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. Well, Integral has always had the problem of being, at least to the degree that it's Ken Wilber's Integral, it has a spiritual dimension. And that's really very difficult for the modern mindset to accept. So, it's not taken seriously in academia. That's always, been a problem. And, even like in the bookstore, you'll see Ken Wilber's books under New Age. So, the culture in a way doesn't know what to do with it. And that's typical of new stages of emerging worldviews, is that they're often seen as a regression, or, they're just confusing to the people who aren't getting it. So, as Ken said, the leading edge of culture right now is the movement into green. Integral is the point of the arrow. But the big movement into the 25-30% of the culture is green. And that's where academia is leading the way into that. And I think one of the things that I've realized more and more as I see the world unfold is that there's not only a vertical development, there's a horizontal development. That every stage is not only giving birth to the next one, but it's also growing in its own right. So we have in a way, more rational world where we know more and we know how to deal with information, and we're creating artificial intelligence, and that continues. It's materialistic, but it's continuing to burgeon. And green, postmodernity, this idea of this radical sensitivity to other people, particularly people who have been oppressed, and to bring them into the fold and to actively do that and to deconstruct all of the triumphalist narratives of history. That continues. I mean, in a way that's shocking, it's much faster than I expected. And, and like Ken said, it's a first tier meme, so it's out there to conquer and to, and to have its truth be, to bestride the world with it. So that's what's happening there. And then I do notice, and I'm curious about you guys, whether you notice this too, but I'm noticing in the culture, as I pay attention to Twitter and, kind of the intelligentsia, if you will, of Twitter, that people are getting tired of right fighting. And people are seeing through these ideologies that had captured them. And they are becoming more and more curious about their political opponents. And I love what Ken said in his talk. He said that in the integral age, the question will be, how can I include as many worldviews as possible? And I do notice that there's an arising of that question in the culture. And I guess I'd be curious to know if you guys see any of that too, or how you see this.
Bence?
Yes, I think I pick up first that part. Where do you find Ken Wilber's books in the bookstores? In which department? Because I see them sometimes as esoterics and sometimes as psychology. So I want to credit those bookstores who put it to psychology too. But this kind of oscillation definitely shows what you're saying, that it's a new approach. It's something that transcends science and includes science. And one of the critics of integral theory often is that it cannot be proved by science. So it's not enough scientific. And of course, it's not, because it's post-scientific, including science. So that's why we don't have to worry too much about proving everything. That's the modernist orange paradigm, right? And the postmodern paradigm, especially the integral paradigm, also includes the personal experience, which self-validates itself. If you have a Satori or Nirvana experience, nobody has to prove it for you with science. You will simply know it because it's your experience. So anyway, I could go on with that. I just wanted to balance out that bookstores thing. And the other thing that you mentioned, that more and more people, hopefully, and Ken has this prediction with the percentages, are tired of fighting who is right and rather want to include each other's worldview. I see that also happening. Like I see the integral stage of consciousness becoming more, and whether it's Wilberian or non-Wilberian, just simply functioning from that altitude is definitely more. I see more of the postmodern as well. So green and teal, postmodern and post-postmodern are both strengthening. And what you didn't mention yet, Jeff, I'm sure you are very much aware of it, and Ken talks a lot about it, that the populist leaders today, the strongman leaders, might be a counter reaction to an overdose of postmodernism. And that's very clear in Hungary as well. Marcelo, you mentioned your president in Brazil, and
Jeff was with Trump.
We got Trump.
Yeah, you have Trump now in the background somewhere.
Oh, he's still there,
but still lingering.
Yeah.
And we have Orban in Hungary, which is a total shame for maybe 80% of the Hungarians. And we also think a lot, how did it happen, and how could, and I think, and one of the main points that Orban is pressing all the time is the migrants, and also the gays, which is just unheard in this era. We had been way beyond this. We had already been orange and postmodern enough not to have these questions, but exactly because of the postmodern, we accept everyone, and we try to enforce on everyone, accepting everyone. This green enforcement, this postmodern mean green meme, might be a trigger that brings out the unheard masses from earlier stages, from red-blue stages, that could elect a president like this. Though in Hungary, less than 20% elected this president, but then they rewrote the constitution for anybody else again to win. So it's a really nasty political game. And I think it's easy to understand from an integral perspective why evolution can go not only forward, but can go backwards. But I have a firm belief that this backward movement is just temporary, like a temporary regression, and there is no other way to go than forward again. And now we are in the learning curve, how to live. Maybe we have to tame the postmodern to have a softer version so that we can really go to integral.
Yeah, I'd like to chime on politics and Trump and Bolsonaro's and version of it, but I'd like to address something that you said, Jeff, and you also, Bence, because in one hand, I agree that people are getting tired of the fragmentation and not only the fragmentation, but getting tired of the excess of the postmodern and green. But on the other hand, and it's to me, it is very interesting that I heard your podcast when you talk about the Twitter of Nora Batterson, Jeff, around the evolution and the stage development is bullshit. And I want to share experience because I think you both know that I work to bring integral to organizations. And then I think the entry point that I use, I never talk about integral, or it's a kind of in the background of everything. The entry point that I found was through complexity. And then I found David Snowden and the Kinefin model, the guy from Wales. And then there are a lot of people in the integral community using Kinefin. But there's something that just happened similar to the Twitter of Nora Batson. I went to attend a training that David Snowden was given at Columbia University in New York. And in the first 10 minutes, he said that spiral dynamics and Ken Wilber work was bullshit. And also TRU, which is something that I used a lot, was totally flawed. So in the first 10 minutes, the two main influences that I have was totally destroyed by David Snowden. But it was very interesting, and I think it's the same with Nora Batterson and the warm maps. It is really something that is second tier in terms of the perspective they offer, both Kinefin and the warm. And it's, to me, is striking which people that are somehow integrally or second tier intuitive and ingrained still refuse the idea of stage somehow. So, and also just building on that, I would like to ask you, both of you, what's your sense about the manifestation of or the growing of people such as Jordan Peterson and the Rebel Wisdom and this counter movement of the excess of green?
Well, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. You know, so Nora Batson tweets, stage theory is BS, it's colonial as hell, and it has to end. Okay, so I did a podcast on that. By the way, I just did a podcast on the new book called The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow, which is basically a 700-page anthropological book that makes the same case, that stage theory is, you know, any idea of development and progress is out the window. And I would say that that's this continuing manifestation of green that is ultimately, in a way, purifying. I get that it almost brings a religious quality of emptiness to the scene. You know, any mental construct is interrogated, is deconstructed, is questioned. And that ought to happen, because if you offer a hierarchy, any kind of a hierarchical or holarchical construct to somebody who's modern, they're going to turn it into some kind of an oppressive system. You know, you got to go through this radical deconstruction in order to have, you know, take a breath and then just begin to see the natural hierarchy of development, of growth, that a 3-year-old turns into a 12-year-old, turns into a 19-year-old, and that they're all precious, but there is a trajectory. Things are gained, things are lost, but there is a trajectory and even a teleology. There's even a spiritual dimension to this, you know, big ball of helium and hydrogen that turned into us. I mean, come on. So I don't know. I think I'm rambling here now, but I want to argue. I want to befriend this radical deconstruction because I think it's probably good for society to have it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying your rambling. So Marcelo, you need to remind me of the original question.
No, yeah, I think the question is regarding where Jeff started around the idea of people getting sick or tired of postmodern of green, and the kind of responses are kind of not offering a perspective that is holding it, but we're still in the midst of
Yes, I also I am usually friendly with extreme green people. Like a big friend is Jorge Ferrer, who is one of the greatest denier of Wilber and perennial eternal stages, and we are still friends. And because I think connection, friendship, and love is more important than our mental constructs. And this is my green side. Still, my intellect maintains or believes, or I don't know how to say it, that there are stages. And I have been to a couple of altered state experiences when the mind calms and stops, and I am beyond, way deeper. And it's true that from there, making mental constructs and systems, even that of evolution and stages, is just a construct. But if I would have stayed there, I would be green and deny all what's mind, you know, I denied. But I also noticed that these experiences always end. We come back to the mind. And when we are back in the mind, we cannot help but categorize things and label things. That's the nature of the mind. So while we are spending our time in the mind, why not having the most encompassive, comprehensive model that integrates all? So my roadmap to cosmos is, when in mind state, which is maybe 90% of our lives, let's have a good model. And I think integral serves that. And when we are out of the mind in a deep meditative state or trance state, then, you know, then we are in a deeper reality. But still, that reality can be also held, understood much better with an integral model than with a deconstructed approach that we throw out in the window all developmental models. And moreover, as somebody asked here in the Q&A, asked me to talk about integral psychotherapy, which is my main expertise for over 20 years, to work with people, to work with consciousness, individuals, groups, large groups, that is just incredibly way more exciting, informative, and loving to work with the integral stage model with people, to understand in nuance the earlier stage, how do they show up in our lives, and the later stages and the middle stages. And when working with people, then the integral stages are not just a philosophical model or an intellectual, you know, trip, but a very deep reality in people's soul. So I'm coming from that deeper connection with integral.
Let me explore a little bit with you, because I think we have some psychologists here in the audience applying integral psychology. Did you create your own framework and integrate with practices? How you develop from a kind of, I understood you are from transpersonal to integral. So what exactly was that you shift from transpersonal to integral, what have you been integrating in your practice?
Well, when I jumped into this pool, integral was called transpersonal in the 90s. Yes. I think we started to differentiate or call it integral in its own around 2000 or later. So I naturally grew with the movement, and I just stayed with the integral movement. At one point, I was the president of the Hungarian Transpersonal Association, but the other members weren't much interested in Wilber, and that drove me nuts. There was some resistance, and so I let it go. It was evergreen. But anyway, what I want to say that I use the Wilber stages for 20 plus years. I didn't invent another model or a better one, but I, both as a psychologist, as a therapist, as a person who has his own experiences and been through his own personality growth and all that, I can talk and I see the nuances of the stages. So when I give us the first presentation of the stages for my student at Integral Academy, it's 8 hours. So 8 hours is the 101 for going through the 10 stages of Wilber, and the next 2 years is unpacking the stages and the other branches of integral. So there's a lot of nuance, because what are the stages of Wilber? This is the summary of many other stage theorists. So if you dive into one stage, you can dive into many models which show many angles from the same altitude. And also I developed a couple of additional insights and theories and models, but I hang it all to the Christmas tree of Wilber, so to say. So instead of developing my own model and little bit using Wilber, I'm using his model as the main framework, as the Christmas tree, and then hanging my additions to that. And additions are both nuances of the stages, altered states. I developed much thicker body of teaching on altered states that Ken offers himself in his books. So, there are other aspects that I add. And I love to work with people. That's the most important. It's beautiful.
Great. Jeff, so just building on that, I know you are so connected with everything that is going on, and you are in Boulder, I think is the epicenter of unfoldment of practices and theories and psychotherapy, integral psychotherapy. How you're seeing it evolving. And
yeah, well, there's there's really two things we talk about when we talk about integral. One is the integral movement that arose in Boulder and Denver in the 2000s, and it's based around Ken Wilber and all of that stuff. And that has it. At one point, the idea was to create a central hub on the internet that would be Wilberian integral, and that sort of all fell apart at one point. That we made tremendous progress, but it's like a dandelion. It's like it's seeded all over the place. And so we have, the influence of Wilberian integral is, metamodernism, and there's, the Institute for Cultural Evolution, Macintosh, it's all over the place, all sorts of salons, and certainly Integral Brazil. So that's one thing. And I think that's growing. And, I'm getting more people listening to the Daily Evolver, and I'm happy about that. And Bence, you're doing great. And then there's the integral that is just the movement of history. Mm-hmm. It's just what's next. And you just see that, you see it all over the place. And I think of it as de facto integral, and it's, you mentioned Marcelo, rebel wisdom. People who are trying to create a bigger, more inclusive system, and who are specifically including the worldview that postmodernity completely hates, which is, sort of the gratitude story of Western civilization, that it actually was a good thing that happened. So there's the gratitude story, and there's the grievance story, and those two stories are both true, actually. They're both 100% true. The only thing that's sort of a problem with them is that each of them thinks that the other one is false. And the great thing is at Integral, we get to see that they're both true. And we get to be friendly with both of them. And I see, Jordan Peterson's particularly, I think Rebel Wisdom is in many ways evolved beyond Jordan Peterson. But Jordan Peterson just came in, with a unapologetic defense of traditional values and, Western civilization and, white people, and, men and women. And that hit a chord because post-modernity, liberals have very much underestimate how they have won the culture war. If you think of the movies and television and where the newspapers are in the mainstream media, there had to be a counter. It was too far, too fast. And different cultures calibrate that differently. And occasionally you'll get something like we had Barack Obama, who I think is one of the most integral thinkers there is. I don't know if he's ever heard of Wilber, but to read him and to read his speeches and to see the flexibility of mind and I'm reading his biography, or his account of his presidency memoir. And it's basically him taking perspectives, the whole book.
All the time, yes, it's amazing.
Unbelievable.
And polarities and paradox in such a nice way. It's
unbelievable.
Beautiful.
So we obviously had a belly full of that. Evolution, we went pretty far, pretty fast. And we had this rubber band effect of going back and picking up the people who certainly progressivism had left behind, which is the God and country people. The people that actually have that gratitude story. And, they're more ethnocentric, they're more religious, they saw themselves being left behind. And who do they choose as their champion? But this red buffoon, Donald Trump. And so, welcome to the, mess of human evolution. And now we're sort of in this middle ground with Biden and trying to figure out where we're going next. But all of these things have to be, continue to be installed in the bigger worldview, and integral just allows it. It's just not a problem. The question is, what do you see that I don't, you Trumpsters? What do you have that I actually have forgotten about or I need to reinstall? That's a good question. And progressives will never ask. I mean, they are loath to ask that question, but integral can. And I try to do that.
Yeah, there is one question here, but I'd like to explore this a little bit, then going back to Trump. And what's the name of the president of Hungary again? This our version of
Orban. Viktor Orban. Yeah.
Yeah, because what's going on in Brazil? So we have Bolsonaro, and then and the opposition of it, there is Lula, who was the left side guy where Bolsonaro beat and went to prison, and now he's going to run again. And we are having a hard time to create a option that can win each one of those guys next election. So in one hand, I hear you, Jeff, about the backlash and the response. But on the other hand, we are kind of stuck in this kind of a polarization and in war. So I like very much what Daniel Schmitzenberger, the guy from Sense Making and Rebel Wisdom, talks about. And then this whole movement called Game B, which is why we still have like Orange or Achiever interest in everything in society. It's going to be very hard to go to a place different from the current polarization. And when Ken talks, and then there's this talk of Ken, I think was last week, talking about this kind of a pessimistic perspective or the extinction narrative about the human species. And then when we hear Ken talking today about, so we are about to reach 10% and the tipping point of something more integrative. So what are exactly your senses of course, we are alive in this short period of evolution, and yet we are in the midst of the unfoldment of something and running the risks of not getting there. So what's your sense?
Maybe I would take on that. I think we are not in a hurry. Like, look at modernity. It was 10% in the 1600s or so. So it needed 300 years to became a mass reality, the 20th century, right? So here we are with integral after 50 years, and we are nervous that it's not all around yet. So I think we don't have to hurry. I would give another 100 to 300 years to integral to really flourish and come out. So I see the cup is half full. I don't see it is half empty. I see it's half full. So I'm pretty, I'm satisfied with, I see that the numbers are not too high in integral in the world, but I'm satisfied with the numbers. You know, sometimes integral has the critics that, oh, it's not enough people, and I don't know, it's not in the mainstream media, and the president is not yet integral and stuff like that. Maybe Obama was, but it's not time yet. Now is the time of orange wrestling with green and blue, orange, green. That's where the masses are kind of cooking it. And integral is less. And it shouldn't be more at this point. So I think this is an era for us integralists where we just need to do our job. You know, you, Marcelo, and Instituto Brasil circles doing there, Jeff is doing there, I'm doing here, etc. And we just need to do our job, and it will slowly grow as it does. As I hear you at the 10th anniversary, you see it more. You see integral there more, you know, in a larger scale. We experienced a boom in integral interest in the last 1 year in Hungary. We saw a steady growing, almost doubling at IEC audiences and getting it global. I see Latin America has more integral initiatives than before the last 1 or 2 years, not only Brazil, but the whole continent. Also, Africa has more integral activities. So I think it's slowly growing. And we see that players who don't agree with Ken or doesn't know this Ken Wilber integral, but coming from that altitude. So now it's not the heroic time where we are going en masses with integral, but I think it's the preparatory time in evolution where we are growing, you know, growing this tissue in humanity's body, so to say. So I'm basically satisfied with where integral is, and I see this backlash, this green and gun and gun country swing, you know, as a smaller wave in a larger progress.
Yeah, me too. I think you're hit the nail on the head, Bence. I love what you said about, you know, where the action is right now is the conflict between green and orange and blue, if you will, or amber. And that's where the culture war is. And at Integral, you talk about doing our job, you know, let's just do our job. One of our, I mean, at least the way I would define that for what I'm doing is I want to be friendlier to the culture war itself, you know, and people, evolution is about fighting your way forward. It's about friending your way forward too. Both of those things. But evolution hates calm. You know, it doesn't want anything to be calm. It wants people to be in the arena with each other. And we want it, you know, to be as fair as possible. And we want to see when you have a president who's elected by 20% of the people, you know, and when this polarity just gets to be grinding and we're not going anywhere and we want to, but by and large, I think that what's happening, it's like one of the basic principles of integral theory is that evolution moves forward by differentiating and then integrating. And so what we're seeing in the culture, and I'll just use the United States here, is that we're seeing ever more clearly this strata that is blue amber, the traditionalists, the strata that is secular and orange, and the strata that is green, postmodern, and sensitive, and those are becoming ever more clear. And I just think that's evolution at work. I mean, I think the integral job is to have the space of consciousness where all of those can arise freely. And when that happens, we identify more with the loving intelligence of the space where they all get to arise freely, that there is a natural integral wisdom that arises at that point. So, I strive very unsuccessfully, but I strive to be friendlier to the war and to make it my job to see that it's fought fairly.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about this idea of dying incomplete. So just do our job and dying incomplete. So it is likely we are not gonna see what we have been working for, and it's okay, right?
Yes, I have seen the promised land. I will not get there with you. I've seen the promised land. Martin Luther King.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Bence, there is a question that I'd like to ask to both of you. And
okay,
can middle-aged rich white men understand postmodern green with the guts? It's made by Billy Jorgensen. So we have people from not only from Brazil. That's, I think, nail everything that we've been saying so far. But
at one hand, I understand, what he means by middle-aged, wealthy man. It's white man, but I think it doesn't matter the color, the age, the financial status. There's a point where someone hears the inner calling, for a deeper path and for a spiritual opening. And I saw many, wealthy men and white men and middle-aged men and old-aged men getting to that point. So I wouldn't, stuck into these categories. And as a psychologist, traditionally I'm called psychotherapist, but I'm not interested to help the mentally ill to get normal, because I think what we call normal is already mentally ill from a higher perspective.
Thank you.
So full of games, and dynamics.
As Kitwit says, there is the normal crazy and the extra crazy. So
exactly.
Crazy.
So why the normal crazy shouldn't get a little bit more mature or even sane or wise? And the key, the door for this is definitely the heart opening process. And there is an initial heart opening which can take you from orange to green. That's what we need first, and without that heart opening, you just stay closed down with your mind as well, and you cannot integrate perspectives. So I think the real integral maturation is not just the cognitive development of understanding perspectives, but after a point, it cannot be done without opening the heart. And from the loving space of the heart, that's the energy that drives you to accept, to turn towards, to listen to, to empathically try on and empathize into it, and thus encompass more perspectives. And I think I call this usually the first initiation, orange to green. But there is a second initiation in this line of development, which is more difficult, from green to teal or yellow if you use spiral. And because when you open the heart, not only love and joy and humanistic, oneness will come, but all the repressed pain, and suffering and trauma will come also from the heart space. So going to a later, more mature integral stage, you need to go through therapy. And what a weird thing that is. Could you subscribe for academia and for the general world that, dude, you need to go to therapy if you want to be a more mature human being. This in itself is a huge reframing that needs to be done in a cultural scale, and we need time to get there. That's why I'm not rushing these two, because I know that it needs time, and when people are ripe for this, then there can be also the second initiation, and that's how you get more tamed egos, more mature personalities, deeper heart spaces, more loving and friendly, as Jeff always puts it, becoming more friendly, kind of a flag of integral. So, and we haven't even touched yet in this conversation spirituality, that is also around the corner and has to be integrated to this maturation. And maybe my final comment on this is that spirituality in this era needs to be expressed through relationships. So it's not anymore the era when I will do my spirituality in the corner alone in my cushion, wearing a role self in the fronts, like blue systems, blue monasteries, blue meditation systems. But we need to bring it to the modern and postmodern self, or spiritual experiences, and the yardstick, the measurement is how we behave relationally. So it's very complex. I think this second tier jump, the great leap, and we need this kind of depth in skill and practice to realize it.
Jeff?
Right on. Right on. Yeah. I'm just absorbing that. And, in a way, this is where the project becomes transpersonal, in the sense that I'm identifying not with this finite Jeff, but with a bigger Jeff, at a minimum, and maybe with consciousness itself, or whatever, loving intelligence. But I can see myself, and I can see myself as an object. And so there's this bigger subject that can do that now. And I can see that there's crazy Jeff, and there's extra crazy Jeff. And oh my God, look at him go. And that is itself, an exercise of self-observation that is, I think, the flavor of integral, and again, human beings there've always been people who've been able to do that. We're not moving through some sort of a rigid lockstep system. There's the world, and this is where the dawn of everything and some of these deconstructive philosophies, they want to see outside the lines, and they want to let it all be this big mess. But there is a shape to it, and the shape of integral is that we can more consciously co-create who we are and who we are becoming. And in the coming integral age, once we get to 10%, there will be a movement of consciously co-creating something that works for everybody, and I'm looking forward to that, and may I live to see it. But this is one of the great things I love about Ken's teaching, is that there's a stage of development beyond integral, and that this isn't the end. This isn't the final statement, that we're, God only knows where we're going. But this is the next stage, and I think a lot of people feel into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is amazing. So we are reaching the final moments of our talk, and then as we are stepping into this space of spirituality, or the mystery, or whatever we can call it, I would like to first thank you both, and ask each one of you to do your final remarks from this voice, from this place of, if it is always hard to bring voice or language, but a best way we can to bring this container to a close from this deeper, mysterious, loving place.
Shall I go?
Yeah, Bence.
Yeah. I left off my remarks with the heart space, opening the heart space, and that's where we should look for a deeper spirituality. And I think the heart space, the depth of it is connected to the field. So kind of the surface of the heart is our personal emotions. But when we go deep into the personal emotions, then we usually go to a transpersonal space, and that's what we should strive for. And sensing from that space, I'm convinced that we are connected to the field, invisible field. You can call it the Hellinger field or morphogenetic or just field. And I think it's a new capacity that we need to learn how to live, move, and connect relationally, from listening to the field. That's what Wilber would call level 7 or psychic. That's what would come the first transpersonal stage beyond the personal, beyond the integral. And I think the cutting edge of evolution right now is a combination of green, of teal, and of this early postmodern. So that's what I see also in my life, but in many people's life I'm working with happening all around the globe. And so that's what I call the flow zone in my work, where we get into the flow, but not just the personal peak experience flow, but a flow of being in sync with what is, and growing this psychic sensibility of being synchronized with the cosmos. And I think we can trust that. And in the unfolding of future, it's not only our beloved Ken Wilber's model will solve humanity's evolution, but the field altogether, with probably many more solutions, will birth it. And of course, what can be my final word if not love is the essence of it all?
Yeah, I love that, and I'm just moved to remember what Ken said earlier, and it was something I've never heard him say before, and I loved it, and that is that as we move into the integral age, people will realize that they're 12 times smarter than they thought. And I love that. And I would add, based on what you just said, Bence, we'll be 12 times more loving. We'll be 12 times more everything. And that's the nature of evolution. If you look at the radical difference of rationality over traditionalism, of postmodernity over rationality, I mean, these aren't subtle. These aren't minor things. This is a big new thing that we're exploring here. And I think 12 times is my new favorite number. And I'm going to work with that for a while. And I guess I would just, there's 3 lines from Walt Whitman, and I would encourage anybody who wants a transmission of integral consciousness to read the poem Song of the Open Road by Walt Whitman. And there's 3 lines that I just love and remember over and over, and that is, I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. All seems beautiful to me. And there's much more, but that's the transmission I think we want.
So thank you very much. I'm really feeling my heart connect with your heart right now. And then I love your idea, through heart, we connect with these fields, and then just feeling the field of integral and feeling the field of loving and healing, and really appreciating your willingness to be with us and just keep doing our work. So thank you, love you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sending love. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bence.
Thank you. Bye.
Uau! Muitos corações conectados.
Wow, a lot of hearts connected. We are many. Well, Marcelo, we're just closing our day. I just wanted you to just make your final um, thoughts and words. I think the words are going to reduce the experience that I wish that we can move from today to tomorrow, to have our heart open, our heart allowing this openness and this aspect that been brought, and to hold the pain that comes when we open up our hearts, and that we might feel this pulse of this bigger field, and it might be connected to us throughout this night, and with this flavor of being with us, that we can be together. And see you tomorrow. Thank you all. And I want to share some numbers of our getting together. So we have this here. We had 1,035 applications that started on November 10th. So 800 free and 143 contributions, volunteer contributions. We appreciate the ones that donated. We had the contributions of 13,000 reais, donations of 13,000 reais, around, and sponsor around 11,000 reais, coming up to almost 40,000 reais. So it's make us this day just coming forward. I just want to invite you to donate, to contribute with Integral Institute that you are living today can happen again. And our partnerships and sponsors, they have this good bag with a lot of things. We are sharing the link, so you can have discount, or you have courses, books, and other options that are being offered by our sponsors, things connected with the integral approach. We have a very special schedule tomorrow also. So the QR code for the ones that want to contribute for the Institute. So we have at 6:30, we have our opening, the same link that you got it for the Zoom and the YouTube also, in the and you'll have the both channels, Portuguese and English as well. We have an interiorization and centering with Vanessa, 2 cases in education with Heloisa Morel, and a business from case with Pedro Paro, and then we have Sean, Marcelo, Elo, and Pedro commenting, and then after that, Sean and Diane Hamilton also paneling a panel that it's going to be very interesting, and then we close up tomorrow. So we want to welcome you tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow.